Like I said in my Isn't It Romantic movie review, I saw two movies on Valentine's Day and they were both fitting for the holiday. The second movie, surprisingly, was Happy Death Day to You. Who would have thought this was actually fitting for a Valentine's Day movie? I sure as hell didn't. Happy Death Day to You is of course a sequel to the surprising Happy Death Day, and let's see if I can get a plot explained without giving too much spoilers away, because it will be a little hard to do so. The movie starts off with another loop happening with someone dying and their life restarting, and thankfully our main character from the first one, she can help with that, because she lived through that experience and died 11 times, give or take. But as she's trying to solve this problem for them, they start to realize that, hey, maybe this weird science project is actually the cause of the loop that happened in the first place. And after messing around with this machine, she ends up getting in a loop again, but this time things are different. Now, one of the things I really admire in this film is that for a sequel, it doesn't play it safe, and it doesn't rehash the same movie again like many other sequels do. In fact, this movie takes a whole different route. Now, what I explained in the synopsis might sound like they're redoing the same thing over again, but to be honest, I left out a lot of other things in this movie because I felt they would be spoilerish and really make it a very different film. One thing that I definitely have to warn you about is that there's very little horror in this movie. Now, you could argue the first film wasn't really a true horror movie. There was a lot of comedy in it, but at least in that movie there was still horror because there was still a serial killer, and the serial killer killing her over and over again to start the loop up over and over again. So at least that horror element was in the first one. This is not in the second one. She dies by the serial killer's hands about 2 or 3 times, maybe a little more. It's hard to tell. I didn't keep track. In fact, most of the deaths that start the loop over again in this sequel is by her own hand and in the trailer with a montage. Or it's in a montage sequence of her killing herself, but most of the deaths she does in this montage is in the trailer. Now, one of the things I liked about this movie, and what I liked about the other movie, is there were little elements here and there that kept it from being just your typical horror movie, or your typical horror movie with a neat concept. The first movie added comedy. It was self-aware. It was still horror. And they also had a little bit of romance as she starts falling for a guy, and it had a decent drama in it and character study, or at least a character development in the movie. In the sequel, they amp all those little things up to the point where there's very little horror, but they amp up the drama, they amp up the romance. That's why this is actually fitting for a Valentine's Day movie. And with this science project, they add sci-fi. It's less horror. It is more of a sci-fi romantic comedy, in a way, which is crazy to say. I did like the drama in this movie. I did like that our main character has to go through something and actually has a conflict at the end where she has to choose one thing or choose another thing. And I don't want to go into details, but she goes through this crazy dilemma that I don't want to spoil. I did laugh at the comedy in this movie. I did like the sci-fi elements in the film. Granted, it is lacking. There's a lot of neat science fiction ideas that they have that other movies have done better, but added into this movie and then sort of just left hanging. Like things to deal with alternate realities and multiverse and multiple versions of other people. But ultimately, the thing that really made it entertaining for me and the thing that I liked about the film is the characters, the reoccurring characters we get back, their struggles, and just watching their acting as well. I like the actors that play these characters. Now, what I've been constantly saying throughout this movie review is there is very little horror in this movie. It is lacking its horror element, and that's one of the things that I honestly didn't like about the film. I thought the first film was way better at balancing horror, comedy, mystery, drama, romance. It did it all very well in the first film that was entertainingly better than the sequel. That wouldn't be a major issue for this film if they really truly went a totally different route for the whole sequel. But there's an ending in this movie, like this twist ending thing, where they emphasize the horror again and emphasize the mystery, but they really didn't. I mean, it's there in the movie, but it's not developed well enough for it to be dramatic at the end. I'm a fan of dark comedies, and some of the comedy, though, didn't work for me in this film. I actually laughed a lot more with Isn't It Romantic than I did with Happy Death Day to You, which I wasn't expecting at all. And because this movie is so full of different ideas and different genres, it doesn't balance it as well as the first film, and it feels like there's so many ideas put in the film and left hanging just to go on to a new thing. Almost like it's constantly changing as the movie progresses. And I do have to say that the cheesiness in this film is amped up to 11 and beyond. It's quite cheesy, and that's probably because there's a big romantic element in this film. And some of that cheesiness could be argued that maybe it's just there for comedy, but there are times where it feels like that cheesiness is serious and it didn't work for me. In the end, I did like Happy Death Day to You, but I didn't like it as much as the first film. And ultimately, I'm going to have to give it 3 stars. So, did you see Happy Death Day to You? What'd you think about it? Go ahead and comment below. And if you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe and check out my movie reviews or countdowns of this year, of previous years, of whatever. As always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.